Good morning, youth. Welcome back. I know some of you have gone on the youth retreat, but those of you who are um, tuning in, I hope and pray that this lesson will be a blessing to you and something that you can take away with it today. When the other ones get back from the retreat, hopefully at the next youth group meeting, you can listen to what their experience was and what they learned about themselves and about our Heavenly Father. Well, our lesson today is titled Bulrushes and Burning Bushes. And we can find it here in Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 to 25, and in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 to 22. There are two things I want you to remember going into this lesson. The last few weeks we talked about Jesus, him being willing to serve us, and how he went to the cross for us to make a way for us to be forgiven and redeemed and be able to spend eternity with God in heaven. We were talking about Joseph before that and a covenant. Remember what a covenant is? A covenant is made by the ruler with the people below him. And they would take animal carcasses, animals, cut them in half, put their carcasses across each other along a path. And the person below the ruler would make a promise to be loyal, faithful, to keep their oath. And if they couldn't do that, may that be done to them as with the animals. They would be killed. And the ruler would say, fine. Well, God made that covenant with Abraham. That's how the ancient people did it. And God said to Abraham, may it be to me with those animals if I don't keep my promises. Well, we know God keeps his promises. We know he's faithful. He is loyal. He keeps his oath. It's us, Abraham and all his descendants. And even us today, we can't keep our promises. We mess up. We make bad choices. We get prideful and bullheaded, stubborn. Our hearts become hardened because we think what we do is correct, is always right. And when you put it up against God, most times than not, it's not. Well, because God kept that covenant and he knew we couldn't keep up our end of the bargain, that's how he fulfilled the covenant with Jesus going to the cross. He was the perfect sacrifice. Even though there was no reason for Jesus to do that, he did it for us. He took our place because we can't keep our end of the bargain up most days. Well, with that being said, this is what's going on now. This is 400 years later after Joseph and that Pharaoh. And excuse me, there is a new Pharaoh, and the Israelites have grown to be a large amount of people. And he wanted to find a way to keep them under control because he just didn't trust them. He ends up enslaving them to do all of his building for him. And along with that, they still kept growing. He made a ruling that all Hebrew baby boys should be killed, either at birth, which that failed. Excuse me. Then he ordered them to be thrown into the river. Well, there was one mother who decided, hey, I am not doing that. And when her baby boy was born, she took him and hid him for 3 months. And then when that was getting to be very difficult to do, she made a basket and covered it with pitch. And the funny thing is, that's exactly what Noah did with the ark. Built the ark, covered it with pitch so it would be waterproof. And actually the word for this basket and for the ark is the same in that language. Well, what happened then? She put the baby in the basket and covered it and put it in the river. And the sister, or her daughter, Miriam, the sister of this baby, watched it and made sure it got where it could be cared for. And when this happened, this baby was floating to where the Pharaoh's daughter came out to bathe. And when she saw the basket, she had a servant go get the basket and bring it to her. And when she opened it up, she fell in love with this baby boy. Now she knew it was an Israelite. Meanwhile, Miriam comes to her and says, hey, do you want me to find a lady among the Hebrew people that would nurse this child, take care of it for you until it was weaned? And she said, sure. Well, Miriam went back and got her mother, Jochebed, Moses' mother. And look how the Lord blessed Jochebed. She was able to care for Moses 3 more years before he was weaned, and she had to give him back to the Pharaoh's daughter, which she ended up adopting Moses and naming him. And with that, he was very privileged. He grew up in the palace. He was well educated. He knew the ins and outs about Egyptian culture and society. He was definitely blessed with that. But remember, he probably knew a little bit about the Hebrew culture too, because even though he was 3, there's probably some things that were impressed upon him during that time with Jochebed. Well, this is what's happening. God is at work. He keeps baby Moses safe. He is putting him in a place that he is able to be trained and prepared for what he has planned for him coming down the way. Well, this is what happened. As Moses is an adult, he sees an Egyptian beating an Israelite slave. And Moses goes over to break it up. As he does this, he ends up killing the Egyptian official. He takes the body and hides it and buries it in the sand. And he thinks, whew, I'm clear. This is good. I'm fine. Well, next thing, he sees 2 Israelites fighting. And he's like, come on, guys, don't fight. Can we get along? Can we find like a compromise here? Well, one of the Israelite slaves turns to him and says, what are you going to do to us what you did to that Egyptian? And Moses realized that there were witnesses to what he did. And he knows if he stays around much longer, and if the Pharaoh knows, doesn't matter who he is, the daughter's adopted son or not, he is going to be killed. So he takes off. He runs away because he doesn't want to die. Well, he is fleeing eastward to a place where the Midianites live. And this is a nomadic tribe that's actually linked to Abraham through one of his wives, Keturah. Well, Moses comes across a bunch of women who are all sisters, and they are trying to water their dad's flock because they are taking care of it. Well, they're having a hard time. They're being harassed and not being let to do what they needed to do. And when Moses comes along, he protects them. He helps them to water the sheep and make sure they get what they need. And because of all his kindness, their father, Jethro, rewards Moses by marrying Moses to one of his daughters. And her name is Zipporah. And with that, he spends the next 40 years shepherding Jethro's sheep. And the funny thing is, there's a lot God is teaching him, unbeknownst to him, of how to lead and how to manage a large group of people. Because a large group of sheep, they're pretty stubborn too and don't want to do what the shepherd wants them to do. And he has to learn how to manage that flock, just like us. But anyway, we have to remember Moses went from being the prince of Egypt down to a foreigner in Midian. And meanwhile, the king of Egypt, who probably sought his life because of him killing that Egyptian official, has now died. And while the children of Israel continue to suffer enslavement in Egypt, Moses again was learning how to navigate this new life of his. And the Israelites cried out to God for relief. And God knew their situation and heard their cries. Even then, he was preparing Moses to be their deliverer. God prepares and develops his people so he can use them as agents to address his concerns. Well, how does he purpose and develop us? Well, first, he puts people in our lives to develop us. And then he allows us to experience all types of situations that he can hone us. He does this because he wants us, each of us, to be his agents. And he wants us to deliver fallen people in a fallen world. Well, how can we apply this? Well, trust God through the circumstances of life, knowing he can use anything to prepare us to serve him. Our first question is this: how can God use a bad circumstance to grow our faith? What can he do? Well, how can he use that bad circumstance? And that's one thing. Remember, even when Jesus said, once we accept him as Savior, that doesn't mean we're never going to experience something bad. It's just that he will be there to walk through it with us. Well, this bad circumstance can teach us how to trust God, how to develop our own character. How about to learn something about ourselves and about God? How about once we go through a bad situation, how we can help others? And that will also grow our faith even more. Or how about if that bad circumstance helps us to learn how to use our compassion and also our patience? Here's another question: who has helped you grow in your faith? How did these people help? Do you have anybody special in your life that helped you to grow? I know I do. I had this one woman called Pauline, and I will call her my spiritual mother. She guided me, talked to me about God's word, encouraged me. She lifted me up. She was such a blessing to me. There was a man named Stanley, and he was the one that instructed my husband and I to pray over our children every day. And that is such a blessing. And I was so glad I was able to do that to our children, pray over them every day. And then there was another person, a woman named Sarah. She was wonderful. What she did was she instructed my husband and I to have family devotions every single day. And we have had family devotions every night since our eldest daughter was 3, and she is 32 now. That is a blessing to have family devotions every single night. Some nights are not good. We fought. No one could sit still. People were like antagonizing each other. Some weren't listening. You know, it's a family thing, but that's okay. Have them anyway. So those 3 people, I am so grateful to God to put them in my life to help me to become a better person and to understand my role in God's will. Well, here's our next section. This is called God Has a Place of Service for Each of Us. So now chapter 3 begins an account of God's call of Moses to free his people from bondage in Egypt. God appeared to Moses, who was engaged in a menial task, shepherding sheep. The Lord appeared in the most unusual way. A bush that was burning but was not being consumed by the fire. Then Moses heard a voice call his name, but he saw nobody in sight. What is going on here? As Moses approached the bush, God made 3 statements. The first statement was, "Do not come any closer." Well, what does that mean? There is a distance between man and God because God is perfect. He is holy and he is powerful. And Moses was commanded to keep his distance. Second, take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is on holy ground. The presence of God made it holy. Taking off his sandals was an act of humility and respect on the part of Moses. And third, the last statement he made, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God differentiated himself from the gods of the Egyptians and of the Midianites, and he identified himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In fearful respect, Moses hid his face. This was the God who made the covenant. Remember what we spoke about earlier? With Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To bless them and their descendants and to give them the land of Canaan. He would honor that covenant by sending Moses to free the Israelites from the Egyptians and deliver them to the good land that God has prepared for them. Moses was to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, and God was aware of the suffering the people and was acting to change that situation. The Israelites would be delivered into the land of flowing of milk and honey. And this expression represented the abundance and the fertility of this area. Well, Moses was Israel's representative and God's spokesperson before Pharaoh. Moses' response was twofold. Now listen to this. First, Moses doubted his ability and asked, "Who am I should go to Pharaoh? Who am I even worthy? Like, whatever." And he doubted his ability. And I think that's what a lot of us do. We doubt our abilities. There are times that people are asked to help out in church and like, "Oh, that's not me. Can't do that. That's not my gift." Okay, if it's not your gift, I get it. But I feel there's a lot of people not doing what they should be doing in church that God has called them to do because they give excuses. And I hate to be mean about this. There's one excuse that people are doing not to do stuff. And that is, I have to wear a mask. If I have to wear a mask, I'm not coming. I'm not doing. And that is between them and God. But I just want us to check ourselves to make sure that what we are proclaiming or doing is glorifying God in the end. Okay, something to think about and maybe to spend some time in his word about. Well, here we go. So Moses doubted his ability. And how does God reply? He replies to Moses that he will be with him, that he will help him. He promises Moses that he and the people would one day return to Mount Horeb and worship there. Then, if we look at verse 13, Moses doubted his own authority, knowing he would be asked who sent him with such absurd claims. And the Lord answered with the title, "Tell them I am who I am." This title spoke of God's essence, but also distinguishing God from the other various gods of the culture. This name revealed that God alone is the eternal, self-existing one. Yahweh is related to the verb to be, and again reiterated God's self-existence. Yahweh, who spoke of God's relationship with his people as their covenant God, who redeemed them and remained faithful to them. God's faithfulness is to be remembered forever. And remember, that's what Jesus did for us on the cross. He, by his death, he redeemed us. He was faithful to us, even though we aren't. Think about that whole week of Jesus' life. Beginning of the week, they're praising him. At the end of the week, they're crucifying him. Don't we do that? One day we're praising God, and then when things are bad, what's the point, right? We are so fickle. We just change with the wind. But God doesn't. He is steadfast and he is solid. Well, so what were the steps that Moses took next, right? Well, first, he went to meet with the Israelite elders, and he went to let them know that God heard their cry and that he was going to set them free. And he promised that new land to the patriarchs. Second, Moses was to go to the Pharaoh with the elders and tell Pharaoh that God requested that they were going to take a 3-day journey to offer sacrifices to God. That's how he first started it. But then God left Moses know that the Pharaoh would not listen, and that it would take a series of miracles that God would have to perform to make Pharaoh to let the people go. And finally, Moses was to assure the Israelites that once God had finished his demonstrating might, the Egyptians would let them go. And when they let them go, The Egyptians would shower them with riches, gold, silver, clothes, animals. Unbeknownst amount of good things would be given to them. And this would fulfill a promise given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verse 14. And let me see if I can find that quickly. Genesis 15, 14. And it says, "But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." And that is a promise kept right here. Well, how do we apply all this? Well, find the place of service God has for us, knowing He has prepared us for it. Well, what kinds of things might God direct you as a teen to do? Well, especially in our area, it might be somewhat limited, but you can help in Sunday school. You can help in Bible school. You can help your neighbor by doing yard work for free or running to the store. You could also help it on a Wednesday night where they do that local meal in Williamstown. You can help wash dishes, make sure people are served, make sure everything is running smoothly. You can help at a local dog shelter. I don't know if the cat clinic there by the school needs any help, but you can help, you know, clean the cages, make sure the animals are fed. There's a lot you can do. How about helping your teacher at school? Make their load a little lighter. Can you help pass out papers or clean up the room? The one time I was in subbing at school and this young girl cleaned up the floor. It was such a blessing. What a way of service. Or how about if you want to learn a trade? Could you go to the local mechanic and say, "Hey, look, I really want to learn how to work on cars, but can I help clean the shop? Keep the floor clean, throw away stuff, keep the tools clean." There's so much one can learn by serving others that could benefit them in the long run and God. There's so much you can do, but you've got to think outside the box. And so, who are these people that can help you? Well, your parents can help and direct you, your pastors, your teachers, maybe youth leaders at church, maybe your principal or other teachers, or maybe even a community service group can guide you and direct you in what you can do. Well, this is what I want you to do this weekend. Show your appreciation. I want you to think about earlier the people I asked you who helped you to get the faith of where you are now. Was it parents, grandparents, Sunday school teachers, a neighbor, someone at church? Who helped you and guided you into your life of faith? Who was it? I would like you to contact those people this week. Now, it could be through a text, it could be through an email, or in person, or by a card. Why don't you take time and express that appreciation of how those people poured their lives into you to help you to grow in faith, to know Jesus? Now, if there's a lot of people and you don't know, just why don't you write one card and just to thank everyone and have the pastor read it at the church service? That would be such a blessing, not only for yourself, but for the people, because it's always nice to get a little feedback, isn't it? Just make sure you're on the right track and you know what you're supposed to be doing. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and there's a lot in this lesson that we can learn. Take some time and read these verses and do it like on a daily devotion for yourself. Spend time with the Lord. And remember, the Lord will call us into service in things that we might not know or feel comfortable about, but He will also supply us with the ability. Stop with the excuses. It's about time that we take responsibility and accountability for ourselves and say, "Okay, God, where do you want to send me?" And I will go. And that could be to a neighbor that you might not know well, and you might end up having a wonderful friend. Well, think about it, pray about it. Have a wonderful week. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you back here next Sunday. Have a good day.